Blood and ash, that is what I smell whenever a liar smiles at me. Right now, Adrian Hollow was smiling directly at me. We stood in the grand ballroom of the Ravenshade estate, surrounded by shimmering chandeliers and walls lined with pure gold leaf. Too much fake laughter, too much stolen gold, too much hidden rot. In fact, my wolf paced under my skin because the fake peace in this room was suffocating us both. I hated Adrian Hollow because his smile felt like a silver blade coated in honey. He raised his crystal glass toward me, his eyes gleaming with a slick, greasy confidence. A toast to our Alpha King. Adrian purred, his voice smooth like oil. May our packs always share wealth and peace. I didn't drink. My beast wanted to rip Adrian's throat out. 5 years ago, I trusted a politician just like him. That trust cost me half my pack. They were slaughtered in their beds, and I still didn't know who leaked our security routes to the rogue wolves. That failure was a ghost that haunted my every waking breath. It was a heavy chain around my neck. I vowed right then that I would never be blind again. You speak of wealth, Lord Hollow, I said, my voice dropping to a low, gravelly rumble. With simmering rage. Let's see if your checkbook matches your mouth. Adrian didn't even blink. Instead, he just laughed, a light, breezy sound that made my skin itch. He clapped a hand onto the shoulder of a trembling Ravenshade cousin standing nearby. The Ravenshade fortune is endless, Your Grace, he replied, swirling his wine. Ever since the tragic death of the young heiress, Lyra, we have managed the funds with perfect care. When her name left his lips, something inside me shifted. My wolf growled softly. I looked around the room. I heard the clinking of crystal glasses. I heard the whispering of corrupt politicians. I heard the lying beating of Adrian's heart. His pulse was too fast. He was hiding something massive. Not only that, but a strange, faint scent drifted through the heavy air vents. It was a sweet scent of old lavender mixed with a dark, metallic poison note that I didn't fully understand. Why would a dead girl's estate smell like fresh lavender and secrets? The air tasted sour because greed leaves a physical stench in the back of a werewolf's throat. I needed to get away from his greasy face before I lost control and snapped his neck right in front of his guests. Excuse me, I muttered, turning on my heel without another word. That night, the palace felt like a beautifully decorated tomb. I pushed through the heavy oak doors, desperately searching for a breath of clean, cold night air. The glitz of the ballroom faded behind me, but the suffocating feeling of danger followed me right out into the dark courtyard where the deep secrets of this estate were waiting to be found. Chapter 2. The Dead Zone. Moments later, the icy wind of the Northern Territory slapped my face, clearing the nauseating smell of perfume from my nose. I walked down the stone steps of the terrace, my heavy boots crunching against the frost-covered gravel. The main estate was a blazing sun of light and noise behind me. Yet, right ahead of me, lay a massive wall of absolute darkness. It was the East Wing. According to the official pack records, this section of the palace had been abandoned for over 10 years. Dust sheets covered the furniture and boards covered the windows. The stone walls were cracked like broken bones, and wild ivy crawled up the pillars like green, strangling fingers. It looked completely dead. Despite that, my wolf was clawing at my chest, begging me to go closer. I never ignore an anomaly because a single missed detail cost my entire pack their lives 5 years ago. My feet moved over the grass without making a sound. Shadows danced between them as I approached the heavy locked wooden doors of the forbidden wing. The air here didn't smell like abandonment. It smelled like old paper, dried flowers, and life. I stopped dead in my tracks as the wind shifted. My ears twitched. I focused my hearing, tuning out the distant thumping music of the ballroom. For a long moment, there was nothing but the rustle of dead leaves. But then, a sound cut through the quiet night. Thump, thump, thump. My heart skipped. It wasn't my own heartbeat. It was too fast, too light. It was a rhythmic thumping, a living sound, a ghost's pulse. Someone was inside that rotting building. Someone was alive in a place that legally did not exist. Adrian Hollow had looked me in the eye and lied to my face. No matter how hard she tried, whoever she was, she couldn't hide her life from an alpha wolf. I closed my eyes and breathed in deeply. The scent of lavender hit me again, much stronger now, wrapping around my senses like a warm silk ribbon. It was pure, beautiful, and completely terrified. Beneath the moonlight, I stared up at the high, dark windows of the third floor. A tiny flicker of light danced behind the heavy grime of the glass. It lasted for only a second before it vanished into the dark, but it was enough. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Adrian Hollow didn't just steal a fortune. He built a cage. Before she could move away from the window, I felt a sudden pull in my chest. My wolf pressed forward, scratching at my soul. It was a deep, ancient bond resonance that made my blood burn like liquid fire. She didn't know what scared her more, the monsters outside, or the fact that her hiding place was no longer a secret. I gripped the iron handle of the side door, my golden eyes flashing in the dark. As the silence roared around me, I knew I was about to cross a line that would change our world forever. As I reached out to break the lock. Chapter 3. The Ghost's Pulse. Without thinking, I applied a fraction of my alpha strength to the iron handle. Snap! The ancient lock shattered into pieces under my grip. I stepped into the forbidden shadows because my instincts refused to let a hidden truth remain buried. The air inside was thick and heavy with dust, choking my throat. Soon after, I was gliding up the grand staircase. The wooden steps groaned softly under my weight, sounding like old ghosts complaining in the dark. I didn't care about the rules of hospitality anymore. My mind was trapped in a vortex of questions. Who was this girl? Why did Adrian pretend she was dead? Was she the leak? Was she connected to the rogue attack that destroyed my past pack? The mystery clawed at my brain. I reached the third-floor landing. The scent of lavender was overpowering now. It was a wave of pure lightning that crashed against my skin. As fire bloomed beneath my skin, my wolf went wild, roaring inside my skull. Mine, mine, mine. Primal instincts exploded through my veins, forcing my claws to slip out. I stopped outside a heavy bedroom door. A faint yellow light seeped through the crack at the bottom. Inside, I heard two voices whispering in frantic, terrified tones. "He's outside, Ivy." A soft, musical voice gasped. Her voice trembled violently. I felt him, his power. It shook the whole wing. "Hush, child," an older woman replied, her voice sharp with fear. "No one can get past the locks. Lord Adrian made sure of it." Before either could speak another word, I pushed the door open. The hinges screeched like a dying animal. The room was bathed in the warm, flickering light of a single candle. Dust sheets covered grand furniture like white phantoms. But I didn't look at the room. My eyes locked onto the girl standing in the center. Time stood still. She looked to be in her mid-20s, with fierce, intelligent eyes that held a lifetime of survival. She was pale, dressed in a faded nightgown, looking like a captured angel in a gilded cage. An older woman, Ivy Mercer, stood in front of her, holding a rusted iron poker like a shield. Under the weight of my stare, the girl didn't back down. She tilted her chin up, defiance burning through her terror. The moment our eyes locked, my entire universe tilted on its axis. The bond pulsed violently between us, a physical cord of gold light that only a true alpha could feel. She was the erased heir. She was alive. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice a mix of fear and lethal grace. I took a slow step forward, the floorboards groaning beneath my boots. I let my inner wolf surface, my eyes glowing a deep, dangerous gold in the candlelight. "I am King Xander," I growled, the sound rattling the glass windows. "And you are a ghost I am about to bring back to life." And just like that, everything changed, and the war for the Ravenshade throne officially began. Chapter 4. Breaching the Tomb. Have you ever looked right into the eyes of a beautiful ghost? In that moment, my heart stopped beating entirely because the girl standing in front of me was supposed to be 6 feet under the dirt. The rusty iron poker in Ivy's hand shook violently, but Lyra did not move a single inch. Instead, she just stared at me with big, glowing eyes that held a lifetime of heavy secrets. The air thickened between us, turning hot and sweet like a summer storm mixed with fresh. Chapter 5. The Weight of the Lie. After that, the freezing silence in the dusty bedroom felt heavier than a block of solid granite. I stood there, watching Lyra clutch her faded shawl tightly around her shoulders, as if the entire world was trying to blow her away. What would you do if your own family erased your existence just to steal your money? Adrian took everything from me, Lyra said, her eyes flashing with a sudden, dangerous burst of gold light. He forced my relatives to sign the papers, he burned my birth records, and he locked me in this wing. Because of that, a dark, familiar memory flashed through my mind, triggering my deepest childhood trauma. 5 years ago, I trusted the wrong people, and my blindness caused the brutal slaughter of my closest pack brothers. I could still smell the wet copper taste of their blood, and I could still hear their agonizing screams in my nightmares. I refused to let Adrian win because a true alpha never leaves an innocent person behind to suffer in the dark. He did not just steal your life, Lyra, I murmured, my voice dropping to a low, gravelly pitch. He is using your grandmother's massive fortune to buy off my own politicians. Suddenly, Lyra reached into the deep pocket of her gown and pulled out a heavy, strange obsidian key that glowed with a faint purple magic. Adrian is desperately hunting for the ancient box this key opens, she whispered, looking around the room as if the walls themselves had ears. It holds my grandmother's true journals, the ones that prove his treason. Moments later, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the far end of the dark corridor. Chapter 6. Smuggling the dead moments later. We were moving rapidly through the narrow, pitch-black tunnels hidden deep inside the palace walls. I kept my large body positioned firmly in front of Lyra, using my sharp night vision to guide our footsteps over the damp stone floors. We walked through the dark. We bypassed the guards. We broke the law. Still, my heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird because the stakes were getting higher with every single breath we took. Lyra couldn't stay in that rotting estate because her golden cage was slowly turning into an official execution chamber. If Adrian discovered that I knew the truth, he would slaughter her in seconds and bury the evidence forever. "Hold on tightly to me," I whispered, lifting her effortlessly into my arms as we reached the exit. Without thinking, she wrapped her arms around my neck, burying her face into the crook of my shoulder. Her sweet lavender scent washed over my senses, making my inner beast purr with a fierce, possessive hunger. Soon after, we slipped out of the hidden side door and glided toward my line of armored royal vehicles waiting near the edge of the dark woods. But then, I stopped dead in my tracks as my eyes caught a strange sight near the heavy front gates. Sitting in the shadows was a sleek, black carriage with a heavily scratched-out royal crest on the door. Inside the dark vehicle, a mysterious silhouette sat completely still, watching the main house with a pair of cold, glowing red eyes. Who did that carriage belong to, and why were they spying on the Ravenshade estate in the middle of the night? Before I could investigate the strange vehicle, Lyra whimpered softly against my chest, pulling my attention right back to her safety. "I've got you," I murmured, stepping into the back of my secure, heavily armored car and slamming the door shut. Not the wealth he stole, not the records he burned, not the life he erased. Come morning, the entire territory would find out that the Alpha King had left the party early with a very precious cargo. As the powerful engine roared to life and the tires gripped the gravel, I looked down at the beautiful, exhausted girl resting against my chest. We were heading straight to my dangerous Alpha Court, crossing a line of no return that would drag our hidden enemies right out into the blistering light of day. Chapter 7. The Fortress of Paranoia. Do you know what it feels like to hold a miracle in your arms and feel terrified it will turn to dust? Eventually, my armored car slammed to a stop inside the obsidian gates of my own fortress, the Stormborn Alpha Court. The ancient stone walls rose up like giant black shields against the night sky, breathing a cold sense of absolute power. I did not care about the grand architecture because my mind was completely hyper-focused on the breathing girl in my arms. I wanted her safe. I wanted her hidden. I wanted her alive. Because of that, I immediately ordered 3 full squads of my heaviest royal guards to line the hallway outside her private suite. I gave them strict orders to shift and bite anyone who came within 10 feet of her door without my written seal. My old trauma was screaming in my ears, flashing bloody pictures of my past pack members who died because I left a single door unlocked. I was acting out of pure panic, turning her sanctuary into a tight military cage. In that moment, I carried Lyra into the lavish bedroom and set her down on the velvet sheets as if she were made of thin glass. Instead of thanking me, she stood up instantly and walked right to the window, her small shoulders squaring up like a warrior. As the silence stretched between us, she turned her head and looked at me with a sharp, mocking smile that caught me completely off guard. "Your guards are incredibly loud, King Xander," she said, her voice dropping to a smooth, conversational purr. "Not only that, but their patrol patterns are completely predictable. A blind rogue could slip past them in 3 minutes flats." Her voice trembled slightly with lingering exhaustion, yet her intelligent eyes were cutting right through my defensive walls. Deep down, she knew the truth about my overbearing nature, because she had spent 10 years watching people try to control her every move. She did not want a king to lock her away in a different room, and she certainly did not want my pity. "I am trying to keep you breathing, Lyra," I growled, my large hands clenching into tight fists at my sides. "Adrian Hollow has eyes everywhere, and I will not fail another person on my watch." With every heartbeat, I felt the golden thread of our mate bond pulling me closer to her, making my skin feel incredibly hot. She walked over until she was standing right in my space, her sweet lavender scent swirling around my nose like a thick spell. I survived a decade as a ghost because I am smart, Xander. Not because I hid behind big men with silver swords, she whispered, placing a single, warm hand against my chest. Something inside her shifted, and I felt a sudden surge of respect that completely shattered my stubborn pride. She was a survivor who knew how to fight in the dark, which meant I had to stop treating her like a broken victim. As the freezing night wind howled against the heavy glass windows, I realized I had to change my entire strategy if I wanted to win her trust and defeat the monster hunting us both. Chapter 8. The Invisible War. Come morning, the bright sunlight poured through the high windows of my private war room, hitting the massive piles of financial ledgers on my desk. I had been awake for hours, rubbing my aching eyes because the columns of numbers were swimming across the white pages like angry black ants. On the other hand, Lyra was sitting across from me, looking fresh and alert in a simple leather tunic my staff had provided. She was turning the pages with an incredible, lightning-fast speed that made my jaw drop. As the truth unraveled before our eyes, she pointed a slender finger at a hidden column marked with a fake royal seal. "Look right here, Xander," she said, her voice filled with a cold, analytical sharpness. "Adrian isn't just taking my money. He is using a phantom shipping company to hide the payments he makes to your own council members." My heart skipped a beat because her brilliant mind was seeing the invisible traps that my top military advisors had missed for years. In fact, it reminded me of a terrible story from my youth, when my father's old advisor used the exact same trick to steal pack weapons right before the Great Northern Massacre. I remembered the heavy smell of smoke. I remembered the sight of empty weapon racks. I remembered the bitter taste of total betrayal. Adrian Hollow was using the exact same playbook to rot my kingdom from the inside out. As if pulled by a string, I leaned across the wooden table, my eyes locking onto hers with a sudden, sizzling intensity. "You are a genius, aren't you?" I murmured, a slow, appreciative grin breaking across my tired face. A beat later, a soft, beautiful blush bloomed beneath her pale skin, making my inner wolf howl with a fierce, possessive joy. The physical romance between us was starting to simmer like a low fire, turning every shared look into a dangerous game of unspoken desire. "I had nothing to do for 10 years but read legal books and study financial records, Xander," she said softly, her fingers brushing against my hand. The space between us burned with a sudden, breathless heat that made me want to pull her onto my lap and forget about the war entirely. But then, the heavy oak doors of the war room burst open without warning, instantly shattering the beautiful moment. My beta, Thomas, stepped into the room, his face looking completely pale and covered in a thick layer of cold sweat. "Alpha," Thomas gasped, his voice trembling with a deep instinctual dread. "Adrian Hollow has just arrived at the front gates with a legal battalion, and he is demanding to inspect your private quarters for a missing slave." Chapter 9. The Viper's Dance. What followed was a tense, freezing march down to the grand throne room where the air felt thick enough to choke a wild boar. I sat down on my obsidian throne, letting my massive alpha aura expand across the stone floor like a dark wave of pure water. Meanwhile, Adrian Hollow stood in the center of the room, looking completely immaculate in his fine silk coat and polished leather boots. He didn't look like a man who had just lost a prisoner. Instead, he looked like a viper waiting to strike a sleeping rabbit. "Your Grace," Adrian said, bowing his head with a slick, greasy politeness that made my stomach turn completely sour. "I apologize for the sudden visit, but a dangerous thief escaped my estate last night and her scent trail leads directly to your territory." Still, I did not let a single muscle in my face move because I knew that any show of weakness would give him the advantage. "My territory is secure, Lord Hollow," I responded, my voice dropping to a low, lethal rumble that made the hanging chandeliers rattle above us. "With absolute authority. No one enters my court without my permission, and I don't harbor common thieves." Without warning, Adrian took a slow step forward, his eyes narrowing into two sharp, glittering slits of pure malice. "Are you entirely sure about that, King Xander?" he purred, his smooth tone dripping with a heavy unspoken threat. "Because if the High Council finds out you are interfering with Ravenshade business, they might decide you are too unstable to keep your crown." The tension broke in the room as my royal guards drew their silver blades, the sharp sound echoing against the high stone walls like a warning bell. I bluffed masterfully, leaning forward and letting my golden eyes flash with a feral, terrifying light that forced Adrian's guards to take a step back. "Let them try to take it," I growled, my wolf pressing against my skin, begging me to rip his lying tongue right out of his mouth. When her name left his lips, even though he only hinted at her existence, I knew that the invisible war had officially turned into a race for survival. He did not have the physical proof yet, but he knew I was hiding something precious behind my black stone walls. Eventually, Adrian realized he could not intimidate me today, so he gave a short, clipped signal to his legal team and turned toward the exit. But before he crossed the threshold, he stopped and casually tossed a small object onto the polished marble floor. It was a fresh purple sprig of lavender, crushed and bleeding its sweet, familiar scent into the cold air of my throne room. As the silence roared in the empty hall, I stared at the purple plant, knowing it was a direct message meant only for me. "I know what you took, and I will burn your entire empire to the ground to get her back." Chapter 10. Decoding the Past. That night, the deepest basement of my archives felt completely freezing, like the inside of an icebox. I sat on a hard wooden stool, leaning closely over a small table littered with ripped yellow papers and broken leather books. With her scent in the air, my mind was spinning in 10 different directions at once. The sweet smell of fresh lavender mixed with the bitter scent of old ink, and it was driving my inner beast absolutely crazy. I watched her small, pale fingers trace the faded handwriting in Ivy's secret journal, because I was looking for any clue to ruin Adrian Hollow. Have you ever felt a physical pull so strong that it scares you to your very bones? As the silence stretched between them, I leaned a bit closer until my broad shoulder brushed against her soft arm. A sudden bolt of hot lightning snapped through my veins, making my heavy pulse thrum loudly in my ears. I wanted to protect her. I wanted to hold her. I wanted to tear down the entire world just to see her smile. "Look right here, Xander," Lyra whispered, her voice trembling slightly in the quiet room. "Adrian used a secret numbers game to hide the money. It is a classic merchant code. In fact, she was moving her pen across the page with incredible speed, breaking the hard puzzle as if it were a thin piece of glass. I felt a massive wave of pride hit my chest because she was so incredibly smart. She was not just a survivor. She was a dangerous weapon disguised as a beautiful princess. Not only that, but her brilliant mind was our only hope of finding the master ledger that could send Adrian to the gallows. If we decode this last page, we will find the exact location of the stolen vaults," I murmured, my low voice rumbling deep inside my throat. Between them, something cracked open, revealing a thick layer of raw, burning desire that neither of us could hide anymore. I stared at her full pink lips, and my wolf pressed forward, begging me to lean down and claim her right there on the dusty floor. Why did it feel like my entire life had been leading up to this exact moment in the dark? Truth be told, I was losing my cold, logical grip on reality because her presence was melting my icy defenses. I forgot about the corrupt politicians. I forgot about my heavy crown. I forgot about the mysterious black carriage with the glowing red eyes that was still lurking around our borders. I only cared about the heat of her skin. But then, the ancient papers suddenly fluttered to the ground as a harsh, freezing draft blew through the stone room. My wolf ears twitched violently as a high-pitched ringing sound echoed in my skull. I stood up instantly, my muscles locking into tight cords of pure steel, because the air vent suddenly carried a new, terrifying smell. It was the thick, metallic scent of wet copper and fresh, hot blood. Before she could move, I shoved Lyra behind my massive back, my large claws ripping out of my fingertips with a sharp, lethal snap, as the shadows near the doorway began to stretch and twist into monstrous shapes. Chapter 11. the blood on the marble. Without warning, 3 large windows at the top of the stone wall shattered into a million flying pieces of glass. Black shapes dropped from the ceiling like heavy stones, landing on the cold marble floor with terrifying agility. They were elite assassins, their faces completely covered in dark cloth, and their bodies completely scrubbed of any natural wolf scent. To make things worse, they held long silver daggers that gleamed wickedly in the dim candlelight. In that moment, pure feral terror exploded in my chest because my past trauma was screaming in my mind. 5 years ago, I was too slow, and my family died in a puddle of red blood. I refused to let history repeat itself because Lyra was my mate, and my soul would break if they touched a single hair on her head. "Stay behind me," I roared, a deep, deafening grrrl ripping out of my chest as my face began to shift into my partial wolf form. My golden eyes blazed in the dark and my heavy jaw elongated, revealing long, razor-sharp fangs. A beat later, the first assassin lunged forward, a blur of black cloth and flashing silver steel. My body moved on instinct, dodging the sharp blade by a mere inch before I slammed my heavy fist directly into his ribs. Crack! The sound of breaking bones echoed through the basement as he flew across the room, smashing into a stone pillar. Meanwhile, the other 2 killers rushed at me from both sides, trying to cut me down at the exact same time. I whipped my heavy tail and slashed my long claws through the air, tearing through leather and skin like hot butter. Blood splashed across the white dust sheets, turning the clean room into a horrific, messy slaughterhouse. It was a brutal, fast-paced dance of death, and I was fighting with the raw fury of a demon. Still, one of the assassins managed to slip past my guard, his silver blade slicing a deep, burning line across my shoulder. I didn't even flinch. Instead, I grabbed him by his throat and slammed him face first into the hard floor, snapping his neck instantly. The final killer looked at his dead partners and tried to run back toward the broken window. Without thinking, I pounced on him like a hungry beast, my heavy jaws clamping down on his shoulder until he went completely limp. The room fell into a sudden echoing quiet, save for the sound of my heavy, ragged breathing. I stood in the center of the mess, my shirt torn to shreds, and warm red blood dripping from my knuckles onto the cold floor. Slowly, my face shifted back to normal and my golden eyes dimmed as the intense battle adrenaline began to fade. I turned around slowly, my heart pounding against my ribs, and locked eyes with a trembling but completely unhurt Lyra. Chapter 12. Stitches and Secrets. In the quiet that followed, the thick smell of smoke and copper hung heavily in the air like a dark blanket. I collapsed onto a wooden chair, my large body shaking slightly from the fierce physical drain of the wolf shift. Her touch was so gentle, so incredibly warm against my cold skin. Lyra did not run away in fear from my monstrous form. Instead, she walked right into the bloodstains with a small medical kit in her hands. She knelt beside my chair, her soft fingers trembling as she pressed a clean white cloth against the deep, bleeding gash on my shoulder. Because of that, a sharp gasp of pain escaped my lips, making my inner wolf whine softly at her touch. "You need to hold still, Xander," she murmured, her voice filled with a beautiful, deep worry that made my chest ache. "This is going to require a lot of silver stitches." I watched her face closely as she began to thread the sharp needle, her long eyelashes casting pretty shadows on her pale cheeks. How could a girl who had been locked away for 10 years possess so much incredible courage? "I am sorry, Lyra," I choked out, my voice sounding rough and completely broken. With deep vulnerability, "I brought you to my home to protect you, but I almost let them kill you tonight." What followed was a soft, sad sigh from her lips as she pulled the silver thread through my torn flesh. "This is not your fault, Xander," she said softly, looking directly into my eyes. "Adrian did this. He is trying to break us because he knows we are getting closer to the truth." Deep down, she knew the truth about my heavy guilt because she could see the old scars covering my back. I finally let my guard down, confessing the terrible story of how my past pack was slaughtered because I failed to smell the traitor in our ranks. It was the first time in 5 long years that I had shared that heavy burden with another living soul. As the truth unraveled between us, the final wall around my scarred heart completely shattered into dust. I did not see her as a victim to lock away anymore. Rather, I saw her as my true equal, my anchor, and my future queen. "I am going to give you your name back, Lyra," I vowed fiercely, gripping her small hand in mine, completely ignoring the sharp sting of the stitches. "No matter what the council says and no matter what Adrian tries to do, we will burn his web of lies to the ground." And just like that, everything changed inside my soul, turning my blind paranoia into a cold, calculated promise of total war. Our physical romance was no longer just a faint spark. It was a roaring fire that would guide us through the dark political storm waiting for us at the High Council tomorrow. Chapter 13. I tore the royal treaty in half and threw the white papers right into the burning fireplace. In that moment, the orange flames flared up high, casting long, angry shadows across the faces of my old pack council. I stood at the head of the long mahogany table, my large chest heaving as the smell of burning ink filled the room. I knew we had to strike first because waiting meant giving Adrian time to buy off the High Council. My wolf was pacing wildly beneath my skin because the scent of a hidden traitor was making my flesh crawl. I looked at the old men sitting in front of me and I felt nothing but disgust. "You cannot do this, Alpha King," my lead counselor shouted, his wrinkled face turning bright red. "Breaking this treaty means economic ruin for our borders." Because of that, I slammed my heavy hand down on the wood, making their teacups rattle and spill. "Adrian Hollow sent masked assassins into my private archive room to murder a guest," I growled, my voice shaking the heavy curtains. "He had stolen her youth, he had stolen her money, he had stolen her very breath." As a result, the old men looked down at their laps, unable to meet my flashing gold eyes. They were terrified of a war, but I didn't care about the political risk, because Lyra's safety was now more important than my own life. I remembered a story my father told me about a smart Omega wolf who once defeated a massive alpha using a single hidden trapdoor. This political game was Adrian's trapdoor, and I was going to shut it completely. I would fight for her name, I would fight for her future, I would fight for our pack. That's why I decided to act completely without their permission, which meant I was taking a massive gamble that could cost me my entire kingdom. Truth be told, I had never felt this kind of intense, burning drive before in my whole life. Have you ever had to trust someone when your own brain was screaming that everyone is a liar? As the silence stretched between us, Lyra stepped out from behind the heavy velvet curtain at the back of the room. She was wearing a stunning crimson gown that looked like liquid fire under the golden chandeliers. Her sweet lavender scent hit the air like a heavy wave, instantly calming the angry beast thrashing inside my chest. "The treaty is already dead," Lyra said, her voice sounding cold and sharp like a silver blade. "Adrian has been siphoning your border funds for 3 years, and I have the numbers to prove it." With a single glance, she completely commanded the entire room. She dropped a heavy stack of decoded papers onto the center of the table. The counselors scrambled like hungry rats to grab the documents. I felt a sizzling spark of pure romance bloom between us as our eyes locked across the smoky air. We were partners now, standing on the edge of a dangerous cliff together. But our quick victory was about to crash hard against a wall of dark betrayal that was already waiting for us in the halls of my own castle. Chapter 14. The Rot Within. Come morning, the cold air inside the underground military barracks tasted like old iron and damp earth. I marched down the stone steps, ready to mobilize my elite royal guard to raid Adrian's hidden properties in the city. On the other hand, the giant training hall was completely quiet when I walked through the iron doors. My top general, Vance, was standing by the weapon racks with his arms crossed over his chest. He did not bow his head to me. Not only that, but his body was completely stiff and his scent smelled like sour sweat and deep guilt. "Where are the men, Vance?" I demanded, my hand resting on the hilt of my silver broadsword. "The raid starts in 10 minutes. What's worse, he slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy black dagger, placing it on the table between us. My heart stopped beating for a second because the handle of the dagger had a strange crest on it, the exact same crest worn by the masked assassins from the archives. It was an open loop that sent a chill straight down my spine. Who really gave Vance that blade? To make things worse, Vance looked right into my eyes without an ounce of fear. "The men are staying in their quarters, Alpha," Vance said, his voice flat and cold. "The system is failing us because paper laws can easily be bought with gold coins." Moments later, I realized the terrifying truth. Adrian Hollow had already bought my army. Before she could move, because Lyra was watching from the high observation balcony above, I felt a sudden rush of pure, primal adrenaline. We needed the truth. We needed the ledger. We needed a miracle. What would you do if your own soldiers turned their weapons toward your chest? I felt completely naked without my army, realizing that my royal title could not protect me from the rot inside my own house. "You are committing treason, Vance," I whispered, my voice dropping to a dangerous, icy pitch. Instead of arguing, Vance just whistled softly, and 20 heavy guards stepped out from the dark corners of the room with their silver spears pointed directly at my heart. Rather than shifting into my wolf and starting a bloody fight I could not win, I stood my ground like a true king. Meanwhile, I could hear Lyra's breath catch from the balcony above us. My thoughts spun in circles as I tried to find a way out of this trap. We had to move into the city under a disguise because my own guards couldn't be trusted anymore. But before I could make a single move, the loud sound of a royal horn echoed from the main courtyard, signaling the arrival of an enemy we could not fight with swords. Chapter 15. The Ultimatum. That night, a heavy purple fog rolled over the castle grounds, hiding the stars beneath a thick blanket of dark clouds. I sat in my private study with my hands pressed against my aching forehead, feeling like a prisoner in my own home. But then, the heavy oak door creaked open, and a royal courier from the High Council stepped into the room. He didn't say a word. Instead, he placed a gold-sealed scroll on my desk and bowed quickly before rushing out into the hallway. I ripped the gold seal open with my sharp fingernail, my eyes scanning the elegant handwriting. "They are stripping me of my alpha powers," I said, my voice sounding completely hollow in the quiet room. At the same time, Lyra walked over and stood right beside my chair, her soft hand resting gently on my tense shoulder. The heat of her skin burned right through my leather shirt, sending a sweet wave of comfort straight into my heavy heart. The scroll stated that I was officially under house arrest for warmongering and paranoia, until a mental evaluation could be completed by the council. Adrian had won the legal battle without spilling a single drop of blood. With every heartbeat, I felt the walls of my fortress closing in on us like an iron trap. "They are going to hold a secret vote in 48 hours to give Adrian total control of your territory," Lyra whispered, her voice trembling with a deep, liquid sadness. It was a terrifying open loop that meant our time had completely run out. I remembered a story about a lone wolf that survives a steel trap by biting its own foot off to gain its freedom. I looked up at Lyra, her beautiful face lit by the dim candlelight, and I knew what I had to do. I had to be willing to lose my heavy crown if I wanted to keep her alive. As the silence roared around us, I pulled her down into my lap, wrapping my large arms tightly around her waist. The space between them burned with a sudden, passionate intensity as I buried my face into the soft crook of her neck. "I don't care about the throne anymore, Lyra," I murmured against her warm skin, my inner beast purring with a desperate, fierce love. "I only care about you." Her heart skipped a beat against my chest, and she pulled back slightly to look directly into my golden eyes. "We are not giving up, Xander," she said fiercely, her small fingers gripping the front of my shirt. "We are going to sneak into that assembly, and we are going to show them who the real monsters are." And just like that, everything changed inside my mind, turning my deep despair into a cold, lethal promise of revenge. There was absolutely no turning back for us now. We were two ghosts walking right into the mouth of the wolf, ready to smash Adrian's empire to pieces or die trying under the light of the coming blood moon. Chapter 16. The Coup of Paper. What followed was a cold, humiliating parade into the Grand Council chambers under the heavy guard of my own traitorous soldiers. The room was packed with hundreds of whispering nobles, their eyes digging into my flesh like tiny silver needles. Meanwhile, Adrian Hollow sat at the center of the high judicial bench, wearing a smug, sympathetic mask that made my stomach turn completely sour. He looked down at me as if I were a stray dog being brought in from the heavy rain. "King Xander," Adrian said, his smooth voice echoing off the high marble pillars with a sickening sweetness. "Due to your erratic behavior and unprovoked aggression against the Ravenshade estate, this council has voted to temporarily remove your executive alpha powers." Still, I did not let a single muscle in my face move, because showing rage would only prove his lies right. "You are a thief dressing yourself in royal robes, Adrian," I growled, my voice dropping to a low rumble that made the front row of politicians lean back in fear. "With burning venom, you can strip my title, but you cannot strip my blood." Instead of getting angry, Adrian just smiled, a slow, greasy expression that sent a chilling wave of dread straight down my spine. "The law has spoken, Mr. Stormborn," he purred, deliberately dropping my royal title to twist the knife deeper into my chest. "You are to be escorted to your quarters immediately, for your own safety, of course." Because of that, my own guards stepped forward, their silver spears clicking against the stone floor to force me backward. I looked up at the high gallery where Ivy was supposed to be waiting, but her seat was completely empty. Not only that, but a dark, metallic scent of poison and panic lingered in the air where she had been sitting just an hour ago. What's worse, I realized that Adrian's web had already closed around our small circle of allies. As the heavy iron doors of the chamber slammed shut in my face, my thoughts spun out of control because I was a king locked in a cage of paper and ink. Chapter 17. The ghost fades that night. The quiet inside my private quarters felt like a heavy stone sitting directly on my chest. I paced the floorboards like a caged animal, my inner wolf howling in profound despair because our resources were completely gone. Before she could speak, as Lyra stepped out from the hidden bathroom door, the door to the outer hallway burst open. Thomas stepped inside, his clothes torn and his face covered in fresh red scratches that smelled like a fierce struggle. "Alpha," Thomas gasped, his voice trembling so violently he could barely form the words. "They took Ivy. Adrian's men arrested her on fabricated charges of high treason." No matter how hard she tried, Lyra could not stop the hot tears from spilling over her pale cheeks, her small body shaking with a deep, liquid grief. "They are going to kill her, Xander," she whispered, her voice cracking into a tiny, broken thread. "She protected me for 10 long years, and now she is going to die because I tried to be brave." In that moment, my deep-rooted childhood trauma flared up like a raging wildfire, choking the air right out of my lungs. I remembered the exact smell of smoke. I remembered the sight of my past pack brothers lying dead in the dirt. I remembered my own useless screams. I was failing again because my arrogance had made me blind to the traps of my enemies. What would you do if everyone who loved you was systematically destroyed because you existed? "I shouldn't have taken you from the East Wing," I murmured, my voice dropping to a rough, hollow whisper of absolute defeat. Instead of fighting back, my wolf curled up into a tight ball inside my soul, completely paralyzed by the heavy weight of my past failures. "We thought we could fight them with truth, Lyra," I said, staring blankly at the gold seal on my desk. "But the world is far too corrupt for the truth to matter anymore." The space between them burned with a cold, tragic numbness as I looked at her, realizing that my crown had only brought her closer to the gallows. Chapter 18. The Crucible of Shadows. As the silence roared in the dark room, the flickering candlelight cast long, dancing phantoms across the velvet curtains. I walked over to the heavy oak wardrobe and pulled out a plain leather traveler's cloak, tossing it onto the bed with a dead-heavy finality. "We are running out of time," I said, keeping my eyes fixed on the floor, because I couldn't bear to see her disappointment. "I have 5 loyal guards left who will follow me to the grave," I continued, my voice sounding completely dead. "We will use the servant tunnels to smuggle you out of the city tonight. You can change your name, run to the southern packs, and never look back." Without thinking, Lyra took 3 fast steps forward, her crimson gown rustling loudly against the quiet air. Before the words left her lips, she raised her hand and slapped me across the cheek, the sharp sound echoing like a pistol shot. My world tilted on its axis as the sting of her slap forced my inner wolf to snap awake, its golden eyes flashing with sudden shock. "Don't you dare give up on me, Xander Stormborn," she shouted, her small fingers gripping the collar of my shirt with an unbelievable fierce strength. "You are the Alpha King, not a coward who runs away when the night gets dark." Under the weight of his stare, her chest heaved with a wild, beautiful anger that completely shattered my cold self-loathing. "Adrian wants me dead. He wants you broken. He wants our people enslaved to his greed," she cried, her voice ringing with the pure authority of a true queen. "If we run tonight, the monsters win forever." She didn't know what scared her more, the danger waiting outside, or the fact that she was falling completely in love with a broken king. Deep down, she knew the truth about my fear, and she was refusing to let me drown in my own past blood. As her wolf stirred beneath her skin, a sudden powerful wave of heat surged through our mate bond, filling my veins with a blistering electric fire. In the echo of her voice, my absolute despair dissolved into a cold, lethal hunger for vengeance, and I knew that if we were going to go down, we would burn the entire kingdom to the ground with us. Chapter 19. The Anchor. As if fate demanded it, the heavy darkness in my chest cracked wide open, letting a blinding ray of pure sunlight rush back into my soul. I stared down at Lyra, my hands still gripping her waist while the sting on my cheek burned like a beautiful golden badge of honor. She didn't know what scared her more, the massive army standing against us, or the raw, untamed power of the look I was giving her right now. In fact, her fierce words had completely anchor-dropped me right out of my deep, paralyzing pool of survivor's guilt. "Adrian thinks he has won because he holds the paper laws, Xander," Lyra whispered, her breath brushing hot against my chin. "But he forgot one crucial detail. Tomorrow morning is the grand public assembly where the High Council must officially name him steward." Because of that, a sudden cold calculation washed over my brain, completely replacing my feral panic with the precision of a master general. "The public assembly requires the presence of every noble and citizen in the territory," I murmured, my voice dropping to a low, gravelly pitch that made my wolf purr with a deadly satisfaction. "He cannot hide his crimes behind closed doors if the entire kingdom is watching him speak." Suddenly, Lyra reached into her hair and pulled out a small, hollow silver hairpin that I had never noticed before. "Ivy didn't just get arrested, Xander. She purposely let them take her because she hid the true master ledger inside the hollow base of the high podium in the assembly hall weeks ago," she revealed, a brilliant, lethal smile breaking across her face. What followed was a sudden, intense burst of romantic heat that flared up between our bodies, pulling us together until our lips were nearly touching. I remembered an old story about a clever fox that walked right into the hunter's lodge to steal the keys to the cages while the hounds were asleep. Lyra was that clever fox, and she had just handed me the weapon to obliterate our enemy completely. "Tomorrow morning we don't fight with claws," I vowed fiercely, leaning down to press a passionate, lingering kiss against her forehead. That's why I finally let go of my lone wolf mentality, realizing that true power didn't mean carrying the weight of the world entirely by myself. We were a matched pair, a king and a queen, ready to step out of the shadows and drag the ultimate monster of our territory right into the blistering light of justice. Chapter 20. The shadows move. Come morning, the cold gray dawn light began to creep over the stone battlements, turning the heavy purple fog into a thin, ghostly mist. I did not wear my heavy royal armor or my gold-trimmed cape. Instead, I dressed in a simple servant's tunic made of rough, dark wool. On the other hand, Lyra stood beside me, wearing a matching gray cloak that completely hid her fiery crimson gown from view. We were standing in the deep, narrow kitchen cellars, surrounded by the busy clinking of metal pots and the rich smell of baking bread. "The military belongs to Adrian now, Alpha," Thomas whispered, slipping out from behind a massive stack of flour sacks, But the servants, the cooks, the cleaners, the stable boys, they still bleed for the Stormborn name. Not only that, but they had spent the entire night passing secret messages through the castle walls, right under the noses of Vance's traitorous guards. An old cook with a deep scar across her cheek stepped forward, silently handing me a heavy leather pouch containing the old obsidian key Lyra had shown me before. "We are with you, King Xander," the old woman murmured, bowing her head with a deep emotional loyalty that made my chest ache with pride. By the time the heavy castle bells began to toll for the morning assembly, our invisible army of shadows was already perfectly in position. I felt a sizzling wave of desire pool low in my belly as I reached out and took Lyra's small hand, her fingers locking tightly with mine inside the deep pockets of our cloaks. "Are you ready to become a ghost one last time?" I asked softly, my golden eyes flashing beneath the dark hood of my cloak. Instead of trembling, her grip on my hand tightened until my bones could feel the absolute certainty of her resolve. "I am ready to stop being a ghost, Xander," she whispered back, her voice sounding like a beautiful sharp silver bell. "I am ready to take my life back." Without another word, we slipped into the narrow, dark servant corridors that wound their way toward the Grand Assembly Hall, moving like a silent, lethal poison through the hidden veins of my own kingdom. Chapter 21. The Walk to the Gallows. As the silence roared in the cramped stone passage, the deep, thunderous vibrations of thousands of voices echoed through the heavy oak walls. We stood directly behind the hidden velvet curtains of the Grand Assembly Hall, watching the massive crowd of nobles and commoners through a tiny slit in the fabric. The air thickened with a suffocating tension because the entire kingdom had gathered to watch the legal execution of my family's legacy. Adrian Hollow stood at the high marble podium, his chest puffed out like a proud peacock, and his silk robes shimmering brilliantly under the massive chandeliers. "Citizens of the Northern Territory," Adrian shouted, his voice booming through the magical amplification stones with a smooth, hypnotic power. "Due to the tragic mental decline of our beloved King Xander, I stand before you today to humbly accept the burden of the regency." Still, I did not let my inner wolf slip control, keeping my breathing slow and perfectly measured as I watched him lie to our people. "He is reaching down to sign the registry papers," Lyra whispered, her warm breath hitching against my neck as she pointed toward the desk on the stage. Before either could speak, I looked down at her beautiful, determined face, feeling the intense bond between our souls pulsing like a heavy rhythmic drum. This was our exact moment, our single shot to rip the web of lies apart before the ink on the contract could dry and bind us to ruin forever. What would you do if the entire world was applauding the man who murdered your past and tried to erase your future? I looked at the heavy brass handles of the stage doors, my large muscles coiling like tight metal springs. "Let's go show them the truth," I growled softly, my voice filled with a cold, triumphant certainty. As if the world narrowed down to just the two of us, she gave me a single, brilliant nod of her head, her hand sliding out of mine to grip the hidden ledger she had just retrieved from the base of the podium. In that moment, I reached out and slammed my heavy boots against the grand oak doors, throwing them open with a deafening bang that cut Adrian's speech completely in half. The massive crowd gasped as one, 1,000 pairs of eyes swinging instantly toward the dark threshold where the erased heir and the forgotten king stood side by side, ready to deliver the final blow. Chapter 22. The Resolution. The Climax. The grand doors slammed against the stone walls with a sound like thunder, cutting Adrian's slick voice completely in half. A dead, suffocating silence dropped over the assembly hall as I threw back my dark hood, letting my golden alpha eyes flash with a blinding, lethal light. Meanwhile, Adrian Hollow froze at the high podium, the expensive ink pen slipping from his greasy fingers and splashing black across the legal registry papers. "What is the meaning of this treason?" Adrian shrieked, his face turning an ugly, pasty white beneath the bright chandeliers. "Guards, arrest this broken man." Yet, Not a single soldier moved a muscle because the raw, commanding aura of a true Alpha King was locking them all in place. "I am the only law in this territory, Adrian," I roared, my deep voice shaking the glass crystals hanging above the crowd. Not only that, but I stepped aside and pulled the gray cloak from Lyra's shoulders, revealing her fiery crimson gown to the entire kingdom. The massive crowd of nobles gasped as one, a loud wave of murmuring exploding through the room like a sudden wildfire. "She is alive," an old duke whispered from the front row, his hands shaking as he stared at her face. The erased heir. Lyra Ravenshade is standing right there. Before anyone could move, Lyra marched up the stage steps, her chin held high as she slammed the heavy blood-stained master ledger directly onto the center of the podium. "Adrian Hollow did not just lie about my death," she shouted, her voice ringing out clear and sharp like a silver bell. "He falsified the royal death records, he bought off your council members, and he used a phantom shipping company to siphon the border funds to fund his private army." What followed was a fast, desperate, lunging movement from Adrian, his face twisting into a feral snarl as his own claws ripped out to tear her throat. Her body moved on instinct, dodging his clumsy swipe, but before he could try again, I pounced on him like a hungry beast. Without thinking, I grabbed him by his fine silk collar and slammed his heavy body onto the hard marble stage, my large knee pinning his chest down until the bones creaked. Crack. He choked on his own breath, his eyes wide with a terrifying primal fear as my sharp fangs hovered an inch from his nose. "The game is over, Adrian," I growled, my wolf purring with a vicious, righteous triumph. As the truth unraveled in front of the entire assembly, my loyal high counselors ran forward with silver chains, wrapping them tightly around Adrian's wrists and dragging him off the stage in absolute disgrace. The legal war was won, the lies were smashed to pieces, and the rightful heiress had finally stepped out of the dark graveyard into the blistering light of day. Chapter 23, Falling Action. The exhale. That night, the heavy adrenaline of the great battle finally faded, leaving my large muscles feeling completely exhausted but wonderfully light. The grand assembly hall was empty now, the thousands of shouting voices replaced by the quiet, comforting chirp of crickets outside the high windows. Soon after, the heavy iron cellar doors were thrown open, and Ivy Mercer was led out into the warm hallway, looking tired but completely unhurt. Lyra ran forward without a single word, throwing her arms tightly around the old woman's neck, while tears of pure joy leaked down her cheeks. "You did it, my brave girl," Ivy whispered, her wrinkled hands smoothing down Lyra's messy dark hair. "You brought the truth back to this house." Watching them embrace triggered a deep emotional shift inside my scarred chest, completely erasing the decade-old ghost of my childhood trauma. I had protected them, I had listened to my partner, and I had stopped a dark conspiracy before it could slaughter the innocent people of my pack. "We couldn't have done it without our king," Lyra said softly, breaking the embrace and walking over to stand right in my space. As the silence stretched between us, she reached up and gently touched the fresh bandage on my shoulder, her lavender scent wrapping around my senses like a thick, warm blanket. The physical romance between us was no longer a dangerous secret. It was a beautiful, burning reality that made my inner beast want to purr for eternity. "You didn't just save my life, Xander," she murmured, her beautiful eyes shining with a deep, breathless affection. "You gave me back my future." Before she could say another word, I leaned down and captured her lips in a passionate, lingering kiss that tasted like sweet victory and absolute devotion. Her heart skipped a beat against my chest as she melted into my large embrace, her small hands locking behind my neck to pull me closer. "We built this future together, Lyra," I whispered against her mouth, my heart pounding with a fierce, possessive love. By the time the moon reached its highest peak in the dark sky, the dark paranoia that had ruled my life for 5 long years was completely gone. We walked out of the quiet hall hand in hand, ready to face the new dawn not as a lone wolf and a hidden ghost, but as a united front that no legal trap or silver blade could ever tear apart again. Chapter 24. Resolution. The decree come morning. The bright summer sunlight poured through the high windows of my private study, painting the golden floorboards in a beautiful, warm light. I sat at my large mahogany desk, but I wasn't reviewing cold financial ledgers or military troop movements anymore. Instead, Lyra was sitting right on the edge of my desk, a large sheet of white royal parchment resting between us. We were writing the final lines of a brand new law, a piece of history that would permanently alter the political landscape of our world. "Read it back to me, Xander," she said, a beautiful, playful smile dancing on her lips as she handed me the gold-tipped feather pen. I cleared my rough throat, my voice sounding deep and completely at peace in the quiet room. "From this day forward, under the joint authority of the Alpha King and the House of Ravenshade, the Ravenshade Decree is officially signed into pack law," I read, my finger tracing the dark ink words. "No individual, noble, or politician can legally erase or disappear a family member for personal financial gain, and any attempt to falsify a pack death record will result in immediate execution. Because of that, the old, rigid legal system that Adrian had used as a weapon was officially dismantled forever." I looked up at Lyra, her beautiful face glowing in the sunshine, and I knew that my transformation from a paranoid tyrant to a fair reformer was completely finished. I didn't need brute authority or excessive guard rotations to feel secure anymore because I had found my true anchor in her brilliant mind. "It's perfect," she whispered, leaning down until her soft cheek rested against mine. That night, we held a grand celebration in the main courtyard, but it wasn't a fake party filled with sycophants and grease smiles like the one before. The commoners were dancing, the music was sweet, and the air smelled like roasting meat and fresh wildflowers. I pulled my beautiful, radiant queen into a slow dance beneath the massive silver light of the full moon, completely uncaring of who was watching us. As our lips locked in a final passionate affirmation of our eternal mate bond, I knew that the ghost of the East Wing had finally found her true home in the arms of her king, ensuring an era of absolute peace and justice that would live on for generations to come. The end.